Okay, so this is going to be vlog number 5, or recording number 5, and I'm learning pretty quickly that the rate at which this video is chewing up the memory, I've got to try and keep this short. So I have to check with my glasses sometimes so I can read the actual time, and I'll try and keep it to 15 minutes. Of course, as soon as I talk, the cats want to join us. That's Cookie. He has a bit of a stinky ass, but yeah. There's Cookie, the Siberian cat, and his brother has just joined us as well. And he'll jump up on the table soon, and that's, yeah. So, looking back over the last vlog, I did vlog number 4, which I thought I was going to have to redo due to the length. I mentioned about, some unsavory behaviour that I have witnessed a lot. I think it happens everywhere. Whenever people are overseas, they go to have a great time. They're in a different culture. They don't speak their language or whatever. And basically, most of them, a bulk of people just don't care. Just like here I am living in the island of Mallorca, where we're flooded with tourists continuously from Germany, especially, and from the UK. They have their own towns that they just rip them apart over the weekend. They hardly wear clothes. They drink as much as they can. They jump into swimming pools, and a lot of them actually kill themselves in the process of if they miss the swimming pool, jumping from their balcony, or just falling because they're drunk. So all kinds of things happen over here, which are a lot worse than, actually now I realize, a lot worse, I guess, than what I did see from people passing through in Japan. So anyway, this just took, watching the last video, I just reminded me of another incident that happened. One of those along those lines, of something along that theme. Many years. So I'm trying to hide my bald spot here. You see, getting to 50, realizing there's some tricks to it. Back in, this is going to get long too. How do I keep this under 15 minutes? Because now I'm cast my mind right back to my very first visit to Japan, and which deserves some background as well. Which Kimber, the other Siberian, they're brothers from another mother. They're different fathers. Yeah, so brothers from another mother. These cats. Say hi. He'll jump back up, but back in 1990, I think October 1990, I guess. Background to the story is, to make a long story longer. In 1989, went to Victoria University. They didn't actually have a Japanese department or Japanese independent graduate course, or in fact, in 1988, I found myself repeating the last year of high school only because there was no Japanese course to go to in Wellington, and I didn't think of going anywhere else other than my local university. So when they told me Japanese was actually going to come into the university, but not until a year later, it's sort of like, knocked me a little bit, and I floated around the last year, which is called 7th form, at age 17. Normally at age 17, you're in 7th form in New Zealand, or 18. I was a little bit younger, being born in April. But anyway, my last year, what's called 7th form, I mucked around the whole year because I didn't know what I wanted to do the next year, and it wasn't really until the end of the year when we visited the university, and I did actually enroll for Chinese language, Russian language, and philosophy. Psychology and philosophy. Those were the 4 subjects I decided would be interesting. It was only when I visited the university near the end of the year that I kind of realized, actually, I would like to go. But by the end of 7th form, I had been mucking around so much that it was too late to kind of recuperate, and I didn't get university entrance. So I think I was missing one subject. I needed, what was it, 4 subjects. I had to pass 4 subjects to get in. I passed 3. Uh, Chemistry was the one that knocked me out. But anyway, but it was kind of good news, because what I did find out was that the Japanese department was going to start, or there would be a Japanese language course from 1989. And so if by repeating my last year, making up that subject that I'd lost, 1988, that would bring me to 1989. So, I thought, okay, why not? This is another story. I'm going down the wrong clue. Anyway, in Japanese class that first year, which I was actually denied. I never applied for Japanese, and it was the only thing I really wanted to do. It was the only motivation I had, was that I could possibly study Japanese, and I applied for it, and I got turned down. I was devastated, and I just thought, what the hell? I've just repeated a whole year of studies, faced the embarrassment of being I think I was the first person in the history of my school, as far as I know, to repeat that last year. So it was a combination of embarrassment, and people just looking at me like thinking, what? Even the teachers were just saying, what are you doing? Why are you wasting your time repeating the last year? Go and get a job. Or study one subject at home, whatever it was. I was like, no, I'll repeat the year, do a couple of different subjects, which I did pass. I think I did history. I swapped out chemistry for history and passed history. We won't mention geography, which also I picked out. Oh no, I repeated geography. Got the same low mark 2 years in a row. Anyway, so what I had failed to mention on my application, I don't remember there being a place to mention it, was that I had already been studying Japanese officially, because when I was 16, in what we call sixth form, I had been doing French until what we call sixth form. In my case, I was 16. And when I got to the last year, 7th form, I'd approached the school principal and said, look, I applied for a Rotary, for AFS, it was called, not Rotary, it was an AFS scholarship, which I was hoping to get awarded and then get sent to Japan for a year exchange program, actually. Oh yeah, remember that. Yeah, so using that as an excuse, I went to the school principal and said, look, I've applied for this exchange program. I might be going to Japan at the end of the year, and I'd like to study Japanese by correspondence, because of course at my high school we don't have this. We only had 2 options. Since the age 13, you could either study technical drawing, or you could, which is I don't know, whatever they do. I guess it forms the basic of engineering and architecture kind of studies, or you could study languages, and languages was only one. It was French. So 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th form studied French, and in fact in 6th form there were only 2 of us, and of 2 people, I think I came out with the highest mark. So I could claim that I was the top in my school for French in 6th form. Leaving out the detail, there were 2 of us. But the final year, I was, I had been studying correspondence, and I noticed that they had a Japanese course in the correspondence school, and I'd already doing 6th form French by correspondence. So I was I understood the system. So I approached my school principal and said, I'd like to study Japanese. And he looked at me strangely, but I had a good excuse that I might be getting sent there to study for a year. So he said, fine. And and I was the only student in school in St. Bernard's College that had ever studied Japanese, and who was studying Japanese at that stage. So in my final year, I studied that for 1 year, and because I ended up repeating the last year, I ended up with 2 years of correspondence school Japanese. So, and in those 2 years, I managed to get through it at quite a high pace. So I managed to do 3 years of Japanese level studies, so which would have been third form, fifth form, third, fourth, and fifth form, up to what we call school certificate level. So I managed to cover and do school certificate level Japanese by correspondence alone in at my high school, and luckily got an A. So that was probably my highest mark. I didn't really pull many A's at school, so it was kind of funny how I ended up getting an A in this kind of weird subject. Everybody just looked at me sideways, and if I told people I was studying Japanese, then my classmates didn't believe me, because I was alone in a classroom listening to tapes and writing things down. So I guess it was a bit of a joke for everyone, but they didn't really know that had come from the fact that I was training and competing in karate classes. I kept that a secret. For most people, didn't know that since I was about 13 or 14, I'd been practicing karate, but I didn't want my friends to know it because they'd target me. You see, we're at a boys' school where they like to, they like to pick on each other, and I knew I was going to become a target instantly if somebody thought or knew that I was training in martial arts. I mean, so, and we had that kind of an unwritten code too at the school that the karate school as well, that sort of people didn't talk about it. We just got on and trained. So that was where my passion came for learning the language, and so and from the time that I started karate, I just became very fixated on learning everything about Japan. If it had anything to do with Japan, I would read it. I was in newspapers and magazines or anything I heard about, or whether it was a movie or the culture or anything. I was just eating it up, swallowing it up. And when in my geography class in fifth form, what saved what really helped my exams of that year, the school certificate year, was that a significant part, might have been 25% of our geography module, was about Japan and the geography, and I just ate it all up. I was mucking around the whole year in that class until we struck the subject of Japan, and suddenly I was all interested. So and that was that in the 80s. So 83, I was 13. So yeah, so all through those early 80s to late 80s, I was just totally interested and totally fixated on Japan and things Japanese. So when I got the chance to learn the language, I went for it and swallowed it up, And so then when I'd applied, waited another year just for this course to begin at university, and then I got denied, it just threw me, So I didn't know what to do except go in there. I just remember knocking on Professor Fujio Kano. He was a great guy, and unfortunately he's not with us anymore since a few years ago. Really shame. I really loved that guy. He was just such a really nice guy, patient and kind, And anyway, I remember him knocking on his door, and kind of like he didn't even turn around to look at me. He had kind of a tough. He was put on this tough side. He's a very nice, sensitive guy, but he liked to put on this sort of hard man sometimes. So my first encounter with him, he just sort of said, "Yeah, come in," didn't even turn around to look at me. And he never even, and I just explained to him, and he just kept looking down at the desk as he just listened and said, "Hi, hi, hi, oh yeah, okay." And then I said, "Yeah, look, sorry, I just can't accept that I was, I said, Japanese is the only thing I've been living for. And I even did school cert, Japanese in 2 years and got my A." And that's when he stopped, looked up and said, "What, you studied Japanese before?" I said, yeah. He said, "Well, why didn't you mention it?" I'm like, well, I don't remember any place in a question about it. And actually I thought it wouldn't be a good idea to tell you, because if I already knew it, I thought maybe that's why I got turned down. I thought that would be a reason to turn me down, if a basic course, if I'd already done the basics. And he's like, no. He said, we've got lots of applicants. There's work. Actually got too many people. I've had to really reduce this class, maximum of whatever, might have been 20 students. 15, 20 students and 50 applicants at least. And so he was specifically choosing those people who had a background, who had done it at high school, or or what turned out, the guys who had already been on like Rotary scholarships or AFS, programs where they had lived there for a year or so. So, so anyway, he said okay, and he came out of there just like on cloud nine, because in one swoop of the pen, I had been accepted for the Japanese course, and that's all I cared about. That's all I cared about, and that was the beginning of a really good time actually that I had, and really encouraging time that I had at Victoria University. So yeah, so Kano Sensei had let me in the door, and so of course I didn't want him to regret that. So yeah, this is completely off the mark of my original intention, but in that class was this guy who would turn up, and if it was a little bit cold or whatever, he'd turn up with one of those masks on, the mask that everybody wears nowadays. Everybody, thank Kimber. All right, maybe you can sit on my lap and you can listen. These masks that now after COVID and stuff, the story of masks. See, in Japan, whenever anybody has a cold or a sniffle, they put one of these little masks on, and then they take the train and go into the public, whatever. So there was this guy who was always like, had a little Japanese bento box, and it was wrapped up with Japanese designed, furoshiki, which is like a cloth which folds out, and he had little dangly things off his books and off his bag, and everything that he had sort of had a Japanese theme to it, and a very intriguing character, Darren. And we became mates. But the thing with Darren is, he influenced me a lot actually, and probably more than what I would give him credit for, face to face. I'm sure he would like a lot more credit. But I have to admit, that guy really tweaked my interest a lot, because he absolutely loved Japan. But not only that, he'd just come back from 1 year exchange program, and he didn't want to be in New Zealand. He came back from his 1 year. He stayed with a host family. He loved it, and he was almost in tears some days, because he just wanted to get out of New Zealand. He didn't want to do his homework. He just wanted to get on a plane as fast as he could and get back to Japan. And that really intrigued me, and encouraged me, because it was his stories that he told me. And the guy had all the ability to stay at university and graduate in whatever he wanted to do, especially in Japanese. But he's actually very talented and very smart guy. He could do whatever he put his mind to. But he was just so lost to that, or just he was just so fixated on, all he wanted to do was go back to Japan anyway. That was going to give him that, he would do it. So instead of there were a few of us there who were really keen on going to Japan, and other classmates, but we'd sort of done it, and we're thinking, okay, maybe we'll graduate first, and then maybe we'll go and try and get a job or whatever we'll do. But at the end of the very first year of university, he was, I don't know, it was probably only a few weeks after the end of the academic year, he was gone. He was gone, and loved it, And I think he went over, as of course, the issue was, if you don't have a degree, if you're a young kid and you're sort of like, I'm saying kid at the age of 19, 20ish, if you just turn up to a foreign country and you're 19 with like zero work experience and no university degree, it makes it really difficult to get a job, to get proper employment, because you need a contract, you need a full-time contract to get a visa, so that your status is there. Otherwise, you're living on a tourist visa, and as a lot of people know, most tourist visas are sort of like 90 days, which is 3 months, and so you end up playing a game of having to leave the country every 3 months, go to somewhere, wherever it is, come back in, get your tourist visa stamp, and maybe you can get away with that twice, 3 times. So 3 times up to 9 months. You might get away with that for a year, but at any moment, the immigration officer can just stop you on the way in and say, "Sorry, we don't think you're here as a tourist. We think you're working. Pack your bags on the next flight out." And that happened from time to time. They do spot checks and things. So, you know, so he was actually left in that position because he decided to go rushing back to Japan, and the only choice he had was to have a tourist visa. So, but however, you were able, a lot of places, because of the shortage of and the high demand for English-speaking people in the form of English teachers, there was a large demand and relatively short supply back in 1989, 1990 we're talking, and so it had always been sort of a typical easy way for people to travel around Asia and the world actually, by just any native speaker could turn up to a school, and many schools, especially private institutes, would be very happy to hire someone, whether they were trained as a teacher or not. They just needed a native speaker around, whether it was to correct the teacher's English, which was often the case, that you might be helping the English teachers who are local Japanese who have terrible English often, and of course you'd be helping the students as well to improve. So there's many doors can be opened through that pathway, but however, having an employment contract and a visa is a major stress. So anyway, Darren had disappeared off to Japan as fast as he could, and in the second year, at the end of the first year, the university announced that yes, they will now have a second year Japanese course too. So that was good news for me, because that's why I wanted to be there. I had enrolled, this time I had enrolled in, the first year I had enrolled in Japanese language and Chinese language at the same time, because neither of those languages could be, you couldn't major in them because they didn't have all the way up to like third year, full year courses all the way to graduation. They sort of had, so we had to put a degree together from bits and pieces. So I think first year I did world religions, actually was my first major. So I studied world religions, which wasn't religious. It was more of a historical analysis of. Half the year was Eastern religions, which of course I was interested to learn, being related to Asia, and half the year was Western religions, which I wasn't so interested in until I studied it, and I realized, this is actually, it's great history, it's great cultural, it's good background info for the world in general. So so the first year had that was the thing I could major in, and then minor in kind of Japanese, Chinese, and linguistics and other things like that. So anyway, this is getting too detailed. Thing is, my mate Darren was a real encouragement, and in the second year, I continued on to the second year, he was in Japan, and he was writing me letters. And, I'd get these, and it was like amazing encouragement the whole time. He was telling me what's going on, how did he survive there, what did he do, and, how he did it, and how he was teaching English at this place, and he'd tell us about his girlfriend and his social life, and, the great time he was having, and etc., and the hard times and the good times. And that was really encouraging, because it just kept my dream going on. I was just like, I want to do this too, I just want to get out of here also and somehow get to Japan. And at the same time, in the first year, we'd set up what we call, the Kano Sensei, the teacher. had called us in. He was a new teacher in a new, no, I can't say department, it was Asian Languages Department, but I don't even know if it was the Asian Languages Department, because Chinese before that was under the European languages for a while. So maybe when Japanese came along, they were able to form an Asian Languages Department with Indonesian, actually. So, all the political things and the funding, it's all about that. But as a student, I didn't care about the politics. I just wanted to study that subject. And so I was doing Japanese and Chinese languages together. And I only studied Chinese as a way to get a deeper understanding of Japanese. Once I realized through my private passion about Japan, I had realized that understanding Japan meant I needed to know about China as well. So so that was that, and that does help a lot to have a background in both. So so in the second year, we finally had that course. But I was just saying that Kano sensei means teacher in Japanese, he called us in and said, look, a couple of us students, 3 or 4 of his sort of pet students. I was one of his pet students, I don't know why, because I just loved the subject so much. I think I was naturally friendly, got on well with the teacher. And me and 3 or 4 others were just, I don't know, always were hanging around the study room. And he said, look, guys, we need to set up some cultural events. And we should start a Japanese culture club. And then we can have things like, sushi making night. We can have movie night. And we can have different events for the students, for the people who are studying, and actually for anybody at the university. We could set up cultural cultural evenings with the Japanese theme. So, so that year, I think my buddy Peter, who was actually with me from my karate days, we went to the same karate school in Lower Hutt, and in his high school they taught Japanese, so he was ahead of me in Japanese for sure then, and very similar, we had that same bug for Japan because of the martial arts, etc. too. So he became the president of the Japanese club that year, and was I vice president? There was also Kim Yen Ko. There was a Chinese friend of ours, and maybe her and I were shared the vice presidency. I can't remember. Oh no, that's right. She was a council member of the Chinese club. So I think So I ended up as the vice president, and Pete was the president. Not that it wasn't a big deal. We just started up this cultural club, but it turned out we became really active though, and we had a lot of events. And the interest in the Japanese culture in those years was growing and growing. It was the late 80s, 90s. Japan was in its peak growth, or slightly past actually its peak growth, but we didn't know that. So we'd have these like monthly events, and they were a lot of fun, went well, and the membership of the club grew steadily. And part of those activities, like especially more in the second year, we started to get information about how people could actually go to Japan. What were the options? And the working holiday program which was set up between several. At that moment, there were 4 countries like Australia, maybe Canada, Japan, and New Zealand. At least these 4 countries had an international agreement where they would allow their young people or people under the age of 30, which probably sounded old to me if I was 90, but now that seems young. Anyway, you could get a visa to work and to study, to work your way around, to help you to get some life experience and to study at the same time. So rather than just have a tourist visa, right, you had permission to work, and that was the issue. So we'd sort of spent a lot of time and effort about gathering information and presenting that in certain information evenings, like how somebody could go, what they could do there. Had speakers coming in saying, they'd gone and they'd taught skiing in the mountains, and so people could go and be ski instructors was a popular choice. Or some people had just gone to work in hotels. Some people had, of course, gone to be English teachers. But so yeah, we had all this information. So as I was one of the main people actually pulling that information together and giving it to other people, it was really, I guess, it was self-serving at the same time, because it was helping me to get more and more focused on the fact that I was going to go to Japan, and very soon. So one day when I was still living at home with my parents in the second year of university. So I remember going home one day and just saying to Mum, "Yeah, Mum, I'm going to Japan in October." It might have been March or something, March, April. But I'd already decided that I'm saving, or have been saving, and I'm going to Japan in October. And Mum just said, "Oh, yeah, okay, whatever." And I didn't really discuss it with her much until October came around, and I turned up with a ticket. I said, "Okay, got, getting my ticket tomorrow. Got my ticket. I'm not sure." And it was only then Mum said, "What? Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah, I told you months ago I was going to go to Japan." She's like, "Yeah, but I thought you were just joking." I was like, "But got my ticket, just now I need to get insurance for some reason, limit insurance." And so I was pretty much set to go for my first time to Japan. And I didn't get to the story that I was going to mention, but this must be over time. And my cat wants to join in. Yeah, that's 11 minutes. I'll stop that there. And I'll go on to what I really want to say.